Hi everyone, I'm Neat Sahone, and in this video I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while, which is a Crack-a-Pack video here on my channel. This video is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast as part of the Ambassador program. I'm one of the ambassadors for Tarkir Dragonstorm, and that's why I have some product early. So in this video, I'm going to open this pack, talk about its contents, in particular, when considering the limited format. I'm going to give you my thoughts about each of these cards, and ultimately tell you what I would first pick in a Tarkir Dragonstorm draft. Alright, so our first common is Sand Skidder Outrider. I really think basically everything that has Endure in this set looks like it's going to be pretty good, because the baseline of this card is that it's a 4-mana 2/1 with Menace that makes a 2/2, but it can also be a 4-mana 4/3 if you're in a deck that cares about counters, like the black-green deck. But making 2 bodies is usually best, and it's a pretty good common. I mean, I hope we don't first pick it, but it's not terrible. Next, we've got Undergrowth Leopard. You know, this is definitely not a card that you want to first pick. It's an okay 2-drop. You know, we had a similar card in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but that format had more artifacts and enchantments than I think this one will, and I think this one does. And so it's mostly a 2-mana 2/2 with Vigilance with occasional upside, and it's certainly not bad. Like, you need 2-drops, and it's nice to be able to still play a 2-drop while maintaining the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, which can come up, but it's definitely not something you first pick either. It also doesn't have like any synergy or anything going on in the format. All right, here is one of the Omen Dragons, one of the common ones. It's Dierger Island Dragon. So on one side, you can cast it as Skimming Strike, and if you cast it that way, it gets shuffled back into your library. Neither side of this is great, but I think it's a great illustration of how modality can be good, because like, you probably wouldn't play a 6-mana 4/4 flyer with Ward 2 if that's all this was, but part of what makes a 6-mana 4/4 flyer with Ward 2 bad is that it doesn't do anything until turn 6. That's not true here, because you can cast it as an okay draw spell with an effect. And if you're trying to trigger Flurry, you know, by casting 2 spells in a turn, or Prowess, which is in the set, the spell option can really help you do that because it draws you a card. Also can get a blocker out of the way, so if you have a bunch of Prowess or Flurry, things can get really interesting. But it's not a great card overall. I mean, you're going to play it in blue decks, but it's definitely not something you first pick. So far, we're definitely on the Endure creature. All right, so here is Stormplane Detainment. You know, we get an Oblivion Ring-like effect in every set, and they're always pretty good. Sometimes they're excellent. Like, if the format has an enchantment theme, they can be excellent. This format doesn't really have one of those. Although I suppose it can trigger, like, Prowess and stuff like that, but it's just a really good removal spell. I think going into the format, I'd be kind of tempted to take it over the Outrider. But the Outrider, part of what makes it good is that this is horrible against it, right? Because you make 2 bodies, so a spot removal spell that's really good isn't very good against Endure creatures that can make 2 bodies. So right now it's definitely between the Outrider and the Detainment. Those are both commons that I can see myself first picking sometimes, but I still hope that's not where we end up. Our next common is Rescue Leopard. So 3-mana 4/2 is not great, but Temur does have a 4 power or more theme. It's not super prominent, but the Harmonize mechanic also likes high power, and that's really what this card's geared for, because you can tap. When it taps, you get to discard a card and then draw a card, and you tap it for the Harmonize mechanic, which lets you tap a creature to reduce the cost of a spell you cast from your graveyard. So it works alongside that mechanic, but it's not like an amazing creature by any stretch. You know, Rummaging is okay. The stat line is rough because having 2 toughness means it dies to lots of 1-mana cards, and that kind of exchange really doesn't do any favors for you. Okay, next up we have Adorned Crocodile. I think this is a pretty good common. It compares favorably with the Sand Skidder Outrider because it does the same sort of thing. You get 2 bodies out of it because you get a 5/3 up front and then you get a 2/2, but you can also exile it from your graveyard and pay a black for the Renew mechanic to put a counter on something you have in play. That's just a lot of value for what this card is, especially for a common. Now, I will say that Stormplane Detainment is good against this because it doesn't kill it. So you don't get the zombie, and you also don't get the Renew. But the creature is still gone, and you paid 5 mana for it, and that's pretty rough. But this is a nice value card. I still think I like the Outrider the most of the cards we've seen so far. Next up, we have Dragonstorm Globe. So 3-mana mana rocks are virtually never good in Limited. We need like a very ramp-focused format. I feel like Strixhaven is like the last time we really felt like you were playing a 3-mana mana rock relatively often. And even though this one has Dragon upside, I'm not really into it. There's even an uncommon in the set that can tutor it up. But you just have to be adding to the board, and playing a 3-mana Mana Rock doesn't do it at all. So I'm not that into it. I certainly don't want to be first picking it. Next up, we've got Jadecast Sentinel. This is really a card that you don't really want. You know, they give us this like clunky artifact creature in lots of sets that sometimes can put cards from graveyards on the bottom of libraries. And sometimes that card can be kind of cool. I mean, Sultai in this set may mill itself a bunch. And once you've milled your whole library, not only does this keep you from milling out, but you actually get to choose what to draw every turn. But that is such a narrow use case that this is mostly just like a bad defensive creature that isn't really going to give anybody any sort of pause. They can still attack into it with almost everything. Even if it can block them, it doesn't really matter that it can block when the rest of their creatures get through, and this isn't killing anything. It's just not an impactful enough card. So not only do I not want to first pick this one, but I don't even think you play it most of the time. All right, next up we've got Desperate Measures. This is a pretty cool design. You know, the Mardu mechanic is Mobilize, which means when you attack, you get some number of temporary 1/1 tokens that come into play tapped and attacking. They get sacrificed at the end step. So the idea here is that you use Desperate Measures on one of those tokens to draw 2 cards. And when that's true, you're kind of doing it for free. You're kind of paying 1 mana to draw 2. You need the setup for that to be what happens. But I don't think it's crazy. There's a lot of Mobilize in the set. And it has all these other uses too. It can kill an opposing X1 for 1 mana. You don't get to draw cards when that happens, but it can do it. And sometimes you can use it to help your creature kill an opposing creature, like by raising its power. And then even if your creature dies, what would normally be a 2 for 1 in that situation isn't, because you still get to draw 2 cards. So it's a cool card. I do think it needs the exact right deck though, and I think that makes it harder to pick over cards that are going to be good in every black deck, like the Crocodile and the Endure creature that we saw. Our next uncommon is Kintree Severance. This is a really good removal spell. I really like that they included cards with hybrid mana costs in this, the colorless kind, because the way the format works is that you usually start by drafting an allied color pair, like black-white or black-green. And then you eventually move into one of the 3 color clans and you play 3 colors in your deck by splashing a bunch of cards from whatever the 3rd color is because mana's so good. Cards like Kintree Severance are nice because you can play them in multiple different decks. You can play this in a Mardu deck. You can play this in a Sultai deck. But if you're doing that, you are spending more mana. You have to typically spend 4 on this. Whereas if you play this in an Abzan deck, you can spend 3. But it is great that it fits in all of those decks, and it's a really good removal spell. Obviously, it's worse when you pay 4 than it is when you pay 3, but that flexibility, I think, is a really good design for a 3-color set. And I like Kintree Severance a lot, but even though it's fairly flexible, it does feel more like a card that I think about picking up when I know I'm in one of the color pairs that it represents. Whereas right now, we're really early in the draft, and I think it's better to stay open than try to count on playing Kintree Severance. All right, well, here we have Channeled Dragonfire, and I think this is going to become our first pick of what we've seen so far. 1 mana to do 2 damage to something is such a good deal. I was talking earlier about how bad exchanges are where your opponent spends 1 mana to kill your 3 or 4 drop or whatever. Well, this is a card that makes that happen, and that's the baseline. The baseline is Sorcery Speed Shock, but it's also got Harmonize, which means you can cast it from your graveyard again. And that means that you get a 2 for 1 ultimately. You can kill 2 X2s. But if your board is built out and you have some big creatures, you can also use this to kill an X4 in the late game by tapping one of your creatures to cast it at a discount. So I like Channel Dragonfire a lot. It's just so cheap. Cheap cards that can deal with more expensive cards are a great way to win limited games because you just come out way ahead in terms of mana equity, and that really ends up mattering in many games of limited because your opponent plays their 3 or 4 drop with 2 toughness, you kill it with this, then play a 3 drop. I mean, that kind of turn, it doesn't sound exciting, but it turns a game around in a big way, and I think we're in on Channel Dragonfire here more than anything. And our rare is a pretty good one. It is Stadium Headliner. I mentioned the Mobilize mechanic. Here it is. It's a 1 mana 1/1 that mobilizes 1 when it attacks, and it can turn into removal. It is situational removal. but you can pay 1 in a red and sack it to have it deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature. And that means, like, if you play this on 1, it's going to feel really good because chances are good that it's going to get in for a bunch of damage with its mobilized friend. And if you draw it late, chances are good that you can make a good removal spell out of it. And you can always attack with the headliner to get 1 more token, and then use the activated ability to kill something. So it's a really flexible card. It's definitely not an insane rare, but I'm also not sure. I don't think we saw any cards in this pack that were insane anyway. Dragonfire is pretty good, right? But I think they're kind of comparable cards overall. We do have a foil too that it's worth looking at, which is Glacial Dragon Hunt. The signpost uncommon for blue-red. You know, it has Harmonize. It's a removal spell, so it has the same thing going on as Channel Dragonfire, where you can make it be a removal spell. You can also just treat it as a draw spell because you don't have to discard when you cast it. But if you discard a non-land, it's like you turn whatever that non-land is into a 3 damage removal spell. So really, I think it comes down to one of these 3 cards. They're all really good. The Dragonfire and Dragon Hunt are both cards that can give you 2-for-1 removal thanks to Harmonize. And the Headliner is just a great 1-drop that's also a removal spell in the later game. I think in the end, you know, especially early in a format, playing with the rare is usually the way to go. It also gives you all kinds of mobilize synergy, which certainly matters in Mardu, where you have ways to sacrifice the tokens for value. It can sack itself for value, so I think it's just really good. It's so cheap, and it can do a lot of different things, and it's good at pretty much any stage of the game. So I think we go with Stadium Headliner in the end here. So thanks again to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Mm-hmm.